It's an honor to briefly introduce today's panel. Dr. Ashley Margol, PNOC ATRT Working Group Principal Investigator and Director of the Children's Hospital Los Angeles Brain Tumor Center. Dr. Susan Chi, Clinical Director of Pediatric Neuro-Oncology, Associate Professor of Pediatrics at the Harvard Medical School. Dr. Alyssa Reddy, PNOC ATRT Working Group Co-Principal Investigator and Pediatric Neurologist at UCSF Benioff Children's Hospital. Dr. Sabine Mueller, PNOC Scientific Co-Founder, Professor of Neurology, Neurosurgery and Pediatrics at UCSF. And Dr. Michael Prados, PNOC Scientific Co-Founder, Professor Emeritus, Department of Neurological Surgery and Department of Pediatrics, UCSF.
Thank you so much, Bruce. So thank you, Bruce, for the introduction. And we're really, really excited to be having this webinar today on Giving Tuesday. And we've got some really exciting announcements. And I'm very excited to be here along with the co-chairs of the ATRT Registry, Drs. Reddy and Dr. Chi. So many of you have heard this all before, but for those who may be new to these webinars, we just really wanted to introduce the reason behind us really developing this registry. So for ATRT, we know we just don't have enough information. So we've gathered all of the retrospective data that we have, and we realized that we still need additional data in order to identify prognostic variables, including clinical variables such as age, extent of resection, biologic variables. As you all know, there's multiple subgroups of ATRT, and imaging variables. And in order to collect sufficient data to make any sort of inferences or acknowledge any differences in these, we really need to get a very large data set. And as you all know, because you've scoured the data, that data set just simply doesn't exist. And the reason it doesn't exist is that patients with ATRT have only been included in a handful of prospective clinical trials led by Drs. Reddy and Chi, as well as our colleagues at St. Jude. And so because they've only been treated on a handful of prospective clinical trials, while we have those data and they're great data, we also rely a lot on retrospective data, and those are often small. So in summary, we need more information. And so we, along with many of you on the call, have set out on this journey to really collect data from as many patients with ATRT as we possibly can. So this is the most exciting slide, I think, of the webinar, but it is really, really exciting for us to say that the registry is open. It was open at UCSF a couple of weeks ago, and actually we enrolled our very first patient yesterday. So that was a really great way to start off the week, and really the culmination of a whole lot of hard work, again, by people on this call, folks at the PNOC Ops Center, and really all of you who have given a lot of input into this project along the way. As you all know, we're going to be using a lot of resources at CHLA. So we're really pushing to open CHLA as the next site, and we hope to have that done in the next couple of weeks. And then we'll start rolling it out to the other US sites in PNOC, and we hope to have that accomplished hopefully by this summer. And then, as you all know, we are very interested in opening this internationally, again, with this idea of getting as many patients' information as possible. So after we've opened a few sites at the US, we'll really start also focusing on opening at some international sites. Next slide, please. So just to refresh everyone's memory, who can enroll in the registry, who's eligible. So all patients with ATRT, regardless of age, patients may be alive or deceased. They may be currently undergoing therapy or have already finished their treatment. And the big thing is we really need tumor tissue. And so that can happen a number of ways. So if the patient's tumor tissue has already been submitted to the Children's Brain Tumor Network or CBTN, then we can get that information from CBTN. If the patient had molecular analysis done at some point and we have that report, then that is sufficient. We don't need additional tissue. Or if none of those are the case, the tissue wasn't sent to CBTN and there was no molecular report done, then we'll need to get the actual tumor tissue from the site where the surgery was performed. And then we will actually arrange for the tumor tissue to undergo methylation profiling at the National Cancer Institute. Some questions that have come up are, does the tumor tissue need to be from the initial surgery? Could it be from a relapse? And it can be from either one. We'll talk about enrollment a lot in a little bit. Jasmine's going to kind of help us go through that. But big picture, if a patient was treated at a PNOC institution, and that can be kind of at any point in their therapy, then the easiest thing to do is for that patient to enroll through that institution. They will have access to all of their records, and it will be the most seamless process. If the patient was never treated at a PNOC institution, and we'll let you know what those institutions are, then those patients are eligible to enroll through a central enrollment process that will go through CHLA.
We have the slides available. The PNOC Foundation website has this list available. You can also search PNOC Consortium, but we have them all listed here for the participating sites, both nationally and internationally throughout the world. We have some sites engaged in Australia, Israel, of course, throughout the United States. So anyone who was treated at one of these sites would be enrolling through one of these sites, and we'll be working through that here. However, if you are a patient family that was not treated at one of these sites, we of course want to have as wide of a net as possible for ATRT patient data and extend this trial opportunity to everyone that's meeting the eligibility diagnoses that Dr. Margol reviewed earlier. So we'll be working through CHLA or Children's Hospital Los Angeles, where I work, and I'll be the patient family liaison for this trial and working to help enroll. So we'll talk a little bit about what some of those logistical steps are and how you can pursue enrollment for both PNOC consortium sites as well as non-PNOC site. Okay, so how do you know the status of your child's tissue? This is one of the prerequisites that Dr. Margol mentioned earlier and is really important to this trial. As mentioned, it's really important to have that molecular subgroup available for getting those outcomes and tying the data pieces together to see what variables both within the tissue and the treatment give the best possible outcome for patients. And that's the overarching goal. So in order to do that, we need the tissue. So how can you figure out the status of that? Asking your treating physician if tumor tissue was previously submitted into the Children's Brain Tumor Network at Children's Philadelphia, or CBTN at CHOP for short. Another alternative would be if you have a report available currently with the molecular subgroup analysis, that will also be sufficient. Ways that you can determine both of those things. Often you'll have access to an electronic medical record portal, and that would have a methylation report available for you to review and confirm. That would be filed under a pathology tab. Additionally, if you can reach out to that treating physician and review your consent. You get a lot of paperwork through the course of treatment. So you should have been provided a consent document copy if you did consent to CBTN. So you can also review records in that manner. And of course, if you aren't sure, if neither of these things are confirmed, you can reach out to any of the institutions where your child was treated at and the treating physicians there where surgery was taking place for either biopsy or resection. And they'll be able to help you determine if you do have tissue available to send out. and if it does indeed need to be submitted. And of course, if any questions arise, you can reach out to us and we can help confirm that eligibility and work with you to review these steps. As part of this study, we want to make sure that costs for tissue preparation and shipment for participation in the registry are covered. That was something that came up and was really good feedback from an earlier family webinar. So we thank you guys for continuing to participate in the webinars and engaging with us on this process. So the study is committed to covering costs for any consented subjects to have those tissue prepared and shipped for enrollment onto the registry. Like Dr. Margol said earlier, methylation will be run out of Bethesda at the National Cancer Institute. So we'll be working to coordinate that. How to actually enroll. Again, if you are a participant at a PNOC site on that list that we provided earlier, then you would request enrollment through your local institution. Anyone who is not treated will be requesting enrollment through that email address listed there. I'm monitoring that inbox on a daily basis. So atrt@chla.usc.edu. And then we would work to set up a consent conference with me on one of the web conference platforms. Right now we're on Zoom, so anyone on this call presumably would have access to Zoom. There's apps available for download on your phone. We can facilitate that way. I also have access to Microsoft Teams, and both of those would be approved consenting platforms. Anyone who's maybe viewing this on YouTube at a later date and is interested and doesn't have access to any sort of video conferencing platform, which would probably be the most convenient way to review documents in a virtual format. But we, of course, want to make this accessible to everyone. Not everyone has a web conferencing setup. So in that instance, we would be able to set up a phone call. Of course, we're presenting in English right now. We'll be able to facilitate translation services if necessary. So you can indicate that in your email and we'll work through making sure this is accessible to anyone with an ATRT diagnosis meeting the prior eligibility criteria. Now, if you are a family that is dedicating your patient data from someone that you've lost to ATRT, and this is just important to you to participate and provide their data to help ATRT research going forward, consent would not be required in that instance, but we would still work through a medical release. And in that instance, you can still email ATRT and express interest in participation. If you're someone that had your family member participate at a non-PNOC site, it would still be the same for a PNOC site. You wouldn't need to consent. You would just reach out and let them know, hey, I would like child's data and imaging sent over for this registry study. So as part of that consent conference, once we have consent documents signed, I'll also be presenting a co-study with that within the PNOC consortium that would just be engaging for quality of life measures and then continuing past 5 years of follow-up data collection. We can review that at the time and you can indicate what things you're interested in optionally. And then we'll also send medical record releases and then contact forms where you can indicate, just to facilitate a little bit, pathology departments, your treating oncologist name and contact information. We'll be able to work with your institution a little bit more easily to fill in any blanks for the documents that were provided as part of your medical record request of your institutions you were treated at. And of course, anyone participating in this trial that's living, we need a legal parent or guardian or participant to be able to understand and willing to sign that written informed consent and assent document. Within California, where we'll be holding the consent conferences, the age of assent for us is 7 and above. So if you have a participant that's below the age of 7, wouldn't need to have them participate in the assent conference, but for 7 and older, we would need to have them assent. We have a simple language document for ages 7 through 13, but ages 14 and older would be signing on the main document with their parents. We would be facilitating that through email. So we'll do DocuSign have the spaces that you are needing to sign sent over after we review and answer any questions that you might have if you're still interested in participating in the registry. And then we'll send it back, and then you'll of course receive a copy. Okay. I'm probably curious about what steps you can take right now, either preparing for opening. So like we said, anyone participating from the PNOC sites, there's different competing interests within academic research. So you can advocate for the importance of this study being open at your local PNOC institution and let them know, this is a study that we would really like to have available at this institution. Can you please prioritize opening it here? And then after it's open, you can let them know that you would like your child to be enrolled. So expressing interest both for it opening and your child's data to be part of the registry. And again, non-PNOC site participants who work to gather some of those institution names, if you were treated at more than one, and then contact information for oncology and pathology departments, so we can facilitate any tissue and treatment record requests. We'll have you initiate the first round of requests and give you a worksheet with the type of request that you'll be asking of your institution built off of our data set. So like Dr. Margol said earlier, we're really interested in the clinical variables and the treatment variables. So we'll be asking for things like chemotherapy roadmaps with dosages and dates. We'll be asking for MRIs, both imaging files, and then a lot of other components related to the treatment. So things like audiology reports, neurocognitive outcomes. As part of this data set, we're really interested in creating something quite complete, so that if there's any variables that are maybe not commonly thought, we can flag those. And I think that that'll be part of creating a really exciting data set. So going through the types of data I was previously reviewing, we also have demographic data that'll be important to this trial, diagnostic, treatment, outcome, and then MRI. We'll be collecting data up front and then following for 5 years from that initial diagnosis. And then for patients who are enrolling at time of previously deceased or already 5 years out from that initial diagnosis, all of that data will just be collected and entered at the time of enrollment. But if you are someone that's a recent diagnosis and participating in this trial and enrolling really around the time of diagnosis, you can see roughly the intervals that you'll be contacted at for follow-up, or we'll be working with the institution to do the data entry and have a long-term set of data. And kicking it back over to Ashley to fill in the blanks on the type of data we're interested in.
The biggest takeaway here is we want as much data as we can possibly get. And I think that we definitely appreciate that this is a heavy lift for our patient families who are coming from non-PNOC institutions. And we're really here to partner with you to help you get this data. I know this looks a little bit daunting. We think hopefully, along with our parent advisory board, we're gonna really kind of go through this process together and try to kind of come up with some additional resources to help you, so we learn along the way. So if we have a few patients who are treated at a single institution that happens to not be a PNOC institution, we don't have to keep reinventing the wheel about figuring out the contact information for certain departments there. We can help share that amongst the community. And one thing that I should mention, and I did not, is that some of you may be aware that through PNOC we're opening kind of a long-term follow-up protocol called PNOC Comp. It's going to be open shortly at most PNOC institutions. It's taking a little bit longer at some others. So if the long-term follow-up study Comp is open at the PNOC institution, we will have you co-enroll on that. And that's just for patients for whom that's relevant. So for patients who are still undergoing treatment or are still alive, we will have them enroll in the long-term follow-up comp. It's nothing necessarily different. It's just a different way of us collecting kind of the long-term follow-up data for patients past 60 months. And we'll be going over those consents with you at the same time as that PNOC 30 consent for patients who are enrolling through CHLA. I think we're going to pass it over to Dr. Reddy to talk about the optional tumor board.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining. And as already been stated, we're really excited and ready to get going with the registry. So for our UCSF families, we will be reaching out in the coming days and weeks to get everyone who's interested enrolled. But just want to talk briefly about the optional tumor board. This is something that we're offering as really sort of a way to get an expert opinion. The recommendations are not required as part of the study, and it is for participants who have had a recurrent or progressive ATRT. So we've had some questions about it. Again, anyone who is in the registry who has recurrence can participate. The people that will be included in the tumor board are the people you see here, as well as other members of the ATRT Working Group. We really do want the treating physician to participate. So we welcome the local neuro-oncologist or oncologist. They don't have to be part of PNOC. We really want them to be there to present the case. It's not absolutely required, but it's always helpful because the person directly taking care of the patient really knows them best and knows the most about them. We will have a pediatric neuroradiologist, and any members of PNOC, which is now several hundred, but anyone is welcome to join and participate. The data that we'll need in order to do the review, of course, are the most recent couple of MRI scans, a synopsis of the treatment so far, the patient's clinical status, and the molecular data. So we'll really need all of this information in order to give a real succinct and helpful, hopefully, recommendation. It is, again, a recommendation, and we already have time carved out on our calendar. So we'll be meeting every other week, and we already have a date set on Tuesday afternoons. But we obviously will schedule it, but hopefully within 2 weeks of having received all of the data and documents that we need. And we will then write up a recommendation. It will not be required that the treating physician or the family proceed with that treatment. It will merely be an expert recommendation or even a list of different options for that patient can do either as a study or non-study after the meeting. So we hope that this will be helpful. And also, I think that we will also, as a community, learn more as we see more of these cases and discuss them together. So happy to answer any questions about the tumor board. And I think we'll be going to a question and answer session now.
Adam, do you want to show your slides before we hop over to?
Yeah, absolutely. 1 second here. There are many people on this call that are on this list, and this list isn't even everyone, but we're just so grateful for everyone who has raised and given this money. It's been a tremendous effort, like Dr. Margol just said, and we truly would not be here without you. It's quite that simple.
Thanks so much, Adam. I see we've had a couple of questions. I think maybe the questions that are general, we can answer live, and then as people put more specific ones in, maybe we can try to address those individually. But I think one question we have that's a great question really is, how do we officially enroll an optional tumor board? So great question. So again, if your child was treated at a PNOC institution, then you would request that your child is enrolled in the registry through that institution. And at the time, you would discuss with your physician that you indeed wanted your child's case reviewed at the tumor board. If your child was not treated at a PNOC institution, then you would do the same process, but you would be doing it through Jasmine and myself at CHLA. Great question. So how much data is needed to begin an analysis? Great question. I don't know the answer. Our goal is to analyze the data as regularly as possible as it comes in. And we work really closely with Annette Molinar, who's a fantastic statistician. And we'll be looking for signals along the way. So it's not like we're going to wait 5 years and then take a look at the data. We're gonna be looking at the data as it comes in. So the goal is to hopefully have enough patients, in the first 6 months to at least take a look and see what we can see. But I don't know how much it will actually take to see certain signals. It's going to depend on the signal. But we're going to be looking. And as we had promised you guys at the very beginning, we're not going to hold on to this information. So if there's something that we find, we're going to get that information out there to you into the greater community as soon as we have it. So I think there's another question here about, is this brand new or have we already requested it through our PNOC hospital? So you may have talked to your PNOC hospital about it. Someone may have mentioned it to you, but so far there's only been one patient enrolled. And so we would encourage you to discuss it with your physician again.
Ashley, is it helpful if I read the questions
Sure, I have some of them up on my others.
Okay, go ahead.
Will you use AI to help comb data quickly? We hope so. We've had a lot of conversations about how we can appropriately and efficiently use AI. Sabine, it looks like you're going to answer that question. Did you say you're going to answer? Oh, maybe you were saying I was answering it live. I didn't know if you wanted to jump in. But yeah, we partner a lot with CBTN, who's got some interesting projects going on, looking at different technology partners and platforms. But that is definitely a goal, if not in the very short term, than the short term. Will you collect tumor tissue from recurrences and subtype those as well? So we are happy to take to accept tumor tissue from both. So if we have tumor tissue from initial diagnosis and recurrence, then absolutely, and we would definitely perform methylation analysis for subgroup determination on those samples if it wasn't done already. Will PNOC institutions be doing any proactive outreach to ATRT families? Yes, so they will. So the impetus is not necessarily on you to reach out to your treating physician to enroll. Once the study is open at that institution, we do expect that the physicians at those institutions will reach out to families, but it never hurts to let them know that you're interested.
I think, Ashley, you already answered the first one, right?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
These are great questions.
Maybe it might be helpful to explain to the group how the registry is going to actually inform the direction for clinical trials going forward in this patient population.
So I think most of you have heard me talk about this before and the idea of external control cohorts. I don't have my cheap graphic that helps kind of walk everyone through it. But when we think about developing new therapies for patients, we always think about kind of what's the gold standard. And most people will tell you that the gold standard for a new therapy is a randomized clinical trial. And that's easy for some groups to do for more common cancers, especially in the adult world, but in pediatrics, pediatric brain tumors, and especially a disease like ATRT, that's really just not feasible. And so we try really hard to come up with more creative clinical trial designs, be a little bit more innovative, and see how we can kind of move new therapies into the field faster. And something that we've been really focusing on is the idea of using an external control cohort. So essentially, using existing data and existing patient level data as a kind of like synthetic control arm. So if a patient were to enroll on a study, rather than 20 patients getting the therapy and 20 patients getting the standard of care, then you could imagine that the standard of care group would just come from data from the registry. And so therefore we would enroll, let's say 20 patients, but they would all get the treatment that we're investigating. It's a little bit more complicated than that, and there are a lot of different kind of varieties of that model. But that's essentially what we want to do. So we recognize that there's so much patient data out there, right? All of your children have been treated, and they may or may not have been treated on a clinical trial where their data was actually gathered, captured, and can be used to really innovate and move the needle. And we really want to change that. So we want that data to be useful. We want it to be powerful. We want it to be a resource to be able to develop new therapies and do it faster. In a nutshell. Well, we're really excited about this. I can tell you, I've been really surprised at how much traction we've gotten from talking about this, and how we've been contacted by lots of other organizations saying, oh, we're really interested in this idea and what you're doing, and gathering all of this real world data, real world evidence from patients, and trying to use it for future clinical trials. So while ATRT is near and dear to our hearts, and we really want to do this, we're hoping that this can kind of spur other efforts for other rare diseases, and can really be kind of a role model for how to do this moving forward. See any other questions? I don't know if anybody else has anything that they want to add.
There's another question about type of data that we'll be collecting.
Yeah, actually, I can take this one, Ashley, because I
Okay.
get it. Yeah, so thank you for bringing this to our attention, and I'm very sensitive to this issue, having been the study chair for the 333 study where we did see toxicity from radiation, and it has been reported on other studies. So yes, our goal is to collect information on all forms of toxicity, whether it's from chemotherapy, radiation, targeted agents. And also, I think as a community, we've learned more from imaging and from the help of our imagers, our neuroradiologists, and some of the techniques have really advanced. So I think that's also information that we want to glean from this registry as well. So thank you for your question.
Okay, I don't see any more questions. But thank you all for being here. Thank you for all of your efforts to get this off the ground. Thank you for your fundraising efforts, for your questions, and ultimately for your participation. And we're here in case you have any questions. Please feel free to reach out. We did post, the email address. It's pretty simple, etrt@chla.usc.edu. We'll make sure you guys have that. And we look forward to continuing to work with you on this effort.
Thank you, everyone.